Jordan Price was 34 years old, and the night before his wedding, he was on his hands and knees in his guest room searching for his grandmother's ring. He had built everything he owned with his bare hands: a business, a home, a future. And tomorrow he was going to give that ring to the woman he trusted with all of it. He slid under the bed to reach it, and then the front door opened. His fiancée's voice, then his best man's. Jordan lay perfectly still on that floor, his grandmother's ring closed in his fist, while the two people he trusted most in the world were physically intimate together in the bed above him, making plans that would have cost him everything he had ever built. They had no idea he was there. And in that silent, devastating moment on the floor of his own home, Jordan Price made a decision that would change all of their lives forever. Before we jump into the story, comment where in the world you are watching from and subscribe, because tomorrow's story is one you need to hear. The early morning light filtered through the high windows of Jordan's workshop, casting long shadows across the wooden floor. The soft whisper of sandpaper against wood filled the space as Jordan worked meticulously on the final panel of an elegant credenza. His movements were precise, measured, each stroke deliberate, as he followed the grain of the wood beneath his hands. This piece was special, commissioned by the Riverside Hotel Group for their new Atlanta location. Jordan smiled slightly as he ran his palm over the surface, feeling for imperfections that most people would never notice. But he would know they were there, and that wasn't how he built things. The workshop smelled of fresh sawdust and varnish, scents that had become as familiar to him as his own home. Looking around at the space, now filled with professional equipment and completed pieces waiting for delivery, he couldn't help but remember the cramped garage where it all started. Just him, basic tools, and a determination that Aunt Gloria had helped plant in him since he was 12. He paused in his sanding, eyes drifting to the small framed photo on his workbench. His mother's smile looked back at him, frozen in time. She'd been gone 22 years now, but Aunt Gloria had stepped in without hesitation, raising him in their modest Atlanta neighborhood with a mix of tough love and unwavering support. "You've got good hands and a steady mind," she used to tell him. "That's all you need to build something real." Jordan applied another round of fine-grit sandpaper to the credenza's surface. He'd built this business the same way he built his furniture, carefully, piece by piece, making sure each element was solid before adding the next. From refinishing old furniture in that garage, to landing his first small commissions, to now having 3 full-time employees and this dedicated workshop space, the hotel contract was his biggest yet, a turning point that felt perfectly timed with tomorrow's wedding. Thoughts of tomorrow brought a warm smile to his face as he thought of Adrienne. 2 years together, and she still surprised him with her quick mind and ambitious spirit. Where he was quiet, she was vivacious. Where he sometimes hesitated in social situations, she moved through rooms with natural grace. They balanced each other perfectly. He checked his watch. Just past 3. He'd promised to meet Devin at the venue by 5 to do one final walkthrough before tomorrow. Setting aside his tools, Jordan began his meticulous cleanup routine. Each tool returned to its proper place, each surface wiped down, the floor swept clean. Some might call it obsessive, but this attention to detail was what had built his reputation. The venue was a restored Victorian mansion on the outskirts of Atlanta, all elegant woodwork and sweeping staircases. Devin was already waiting outside when Jordan pulled up, looking sharp in his business casual attire. The successful real estate developer, every bit as polished as Jordan, was understated. "There's the man of the hour," Devin called out, pulling Jordan into a warm embrace. "Ready for tomorrow, brother?" They walked through the venue together, Devin pointing out last-minute details he'd handled, making jokes about cold feet that Jordan simply smiled at. Their friendship went back to college days, before either of them had built their current lives. Devin had always been the more outgoing one, but he'd never made Jordan feel less for being quieter. "I still remember when you were refinishing furniture in that garage," Devin said, clapping him on the shoulder. "Look at you now. Custom commissions, hotel contracts, beautiful fiancée. You built something real here, man." Jordan felt the quiet satisfaction of a life carefully constructed settling in his chest. Everything was falling into place exactly as it should. By the time he pulled into his driveway that evening, the sky had deepened to purple. The house was quiet, warm lights glowing in a few windows. Adrienne was already inside. They'd agreed to follow tradition with him sleeping in the guest room tonight. The thought made him smile. There was something sweet of these small rituals. He moved quietly through the house, his grandmother's ring box secure in his jacket pocket. The guest room was prepared and waiting, just like everything else. Jordan slipped inside, ready for his last night as a single man, carrying the legacy of his family's love in that small velvet box. Jordan set the velvet ring box on the nightstand and shrugged off his jacket. As he draped it over a chair, something felt wrong. He picked up the box again, opened it, and his heart stopped. The ring was gone. His grandmother's ring, the one she'd worn for 50 years of marriage, the one he'd had carefully resized for Adrienne. Panic rose in his throat as he dropped to his knees, scanning the carpet. Nothing. He leaned down, peering under the bed. And there, a small glint of gold against the far baseboard. Jordan lowered himself to the floor, stretching his arm under the bed frame. His fingers were just inches short. Letting out a quiet breath, he slid forward until his shoulders were under the bed, pushing through a light coating of dust. His fingertips brushed the ring, and relief flooded through him as they closed around the cool metal. That's when he heard the front door open. He went completely still, the ring clutched in his fist. Footsteps in the hallway. Adrienne's laugh, soft and intimate. Then, a male voice that made his blood run cold. "Devin." "They're all at the rehearsal dinner," Adrienne was saying. "We have time." Jordan's muscles locked. He couldn't move without the bed frame creaking, couldn't make a sound, couldn't do anything but lie there as their footsteps moved past the guest room door and into the master bedroom down the hall. The sounds that followed were unmistakable. The familiar squeak of his own mattress, Adrienne's sighs, ones he thought had belonged only to him. Devin's low murmurs, the rhythmic movement that spoke of practiced familiarity, of a betrayal that had clearly been happening for months. Jordan pressed his forehead against the floor, his grandmother's ring cutting into his palm as he gripped it tighter. Every muscle in his body screamed to move, to confront them, to demand answers. But something deeper held him still, some instinct that knew this moment would reveal more truth than any confrontation. When their breathing finally steadied, the real knife twisted. "What time's hair and makeup tomorrow?" Devin asked casually. 9, Adrienne replied, and Jordan could hear the smile in her voice. "Everything's set. My attorney said I should wait at least 18 months before filing for divorce. Makes it look more legitimate. Long enough to get my name on the business accounts. Jordan makes it so easy," Devin chuckled. "Always trying to include you in everything. Did he really add you as an emergency contact on his insurance? 6 months ago. He thinks I'm just being supportive, helping with admin." Adrienne's voice was warm with satisfaction. "The hotel commission is just the beginning. He's finally getting real attention, perfect timing. That's my girl, always thinking ahead." The bed creaked as Devin shifted. "Remember when we tried this years ago? Before I had any real money? We've both come a long way," Adrienne said. "Jordan's sweet, but he's simple, trusting. The kind of man who builds things with his hands and thinks everyone else is just as honest as he is." Their laughter felt like acid in Jordan's ears. He remained perfectly still, memorizing every word, every inflection, every casual cruelty in their confidence. Eventually, Devon got dressed. Footsteps moved back down the hall. The front door opened and closed. Water ran in the master bathroom. Then the bedroom door shut for the night. Jordan counted the minutes in his head, measuring time by his own controlled breathing. 20 minutes passed in perfect silence. Only then did he slide out from under the bed, moving with careful precision. He stood, brushing dust from his clothes with mechanical attention to detail. His reflection in the guest room mirror was just a shadow, but he could see his own outline, straight-backed, composed. He sat on the edge of the bed, finally opening his fist. His grandmother's ring lay in his palm, the gold warm from being clutched so long. For a moment, he simply studied it, this symbol of a lifetime of genuine love that had almost become part of their lie. Jordan set the ring on the nightstand. He lay back on top of the covers, still fully dressed, and stared at the ceiling. His breathing remained steady. His mind was crystalline clear. He did not move toward the master bedroom, did not make a sound, did not reach for his phone. He simply lay there in the dark, mapping out the architecture of everything he had heard, filing away every word they had spoken when they thought no one could hear. Morning light filtered through Aunt Gloria's curtains as Jordan stood before the mirror, methodically knotting his tie. His fingers moved with the same precise care he brought to his woodwork, each adjustment measured and intentional. The charcoal suit fit him perfectly. He'd had it tailored twice to ensure every line sat exactly right. Aunt Gloria appeared in the doorway, holding his freshly pressed white shirt. She'd insisted on ironing it herself, just as she had every important occasion since he was 12. Her eyes met his in the mirror, and he saw the question she wasn't asking. Jordan gave her a small, steady smile. "Thank you," he said, taking the shirt. His voice was warm and clear, betraying nothing of what he'd learned in the dark hours of the previous night. She watched him dress with the particular attention of a woman who had raised him from boyhood, noting the careful way he buttoned his cuffs, smoothed his collar, adjusted his pocket square. To anyone else, he looked like any groom on his wedding morning. But Aunt Gloria saw the steel beneath his composure, the focused quiet that reminded her of the 12-year-old boy who'd learned to carry grief without breaking. The drive to the venue was peaceful. Jordan sat in the passenger seat, watching Atlanta scroll past his window. The morning was bright and cool, perfect weather for an outdoor ceremony. Aunt Gloria drove in silence, one hand occasionally reaching over to pat his knee. She didn't need to speak. She'd always understood him best in the quiet moments. At the venue, everything moved with practiced precision. The coordinator guided Jordan through the morning schedule. Groomsmen arrived in waves, adjusting boutonnieres and sharing flask sips behind the garden pavilion. Through it all, Jordan moved with easy grace, smiling at jokes, thanking the staff, playing his role perfectly. Devon found him in the groom's suite, already deep in his best man performance. "There's my brother," he called out, pulling Jordan into a back-slapping hug. "Let me fix that tie for you. Can't have you looking anything less than perfect today." Jordan stood still, allowing Devon's hands near his throat. He watched his oldest friend's reflection in the mirror, the genuine seeming warmth in his smile, the practiced charm in his movements. Devon had always been the more polished of the two of them, the one who moved easily through social spaces, while Jordan preferred his quiet workshop. Now Jordan saw the hollow center of that polish, the performance that had masked betrayal for 8 long months. "There," Devon said, stepping back to admire his work. "Now you look like a man ready to get married." Jordan smiled. "Thank you," he said simply, and meant it, though not for the tie. The ceremony began right on schedule. Jordan stood at the altar, watching guests settle into white garden chairs. He saw familiar faces from every chapter of his life. College friends, business associates, family who'd driven hours to be here. His eyes found Aunt Gloria in the front row, Her face set in quiet dignity. The music shifted. The guests rose. And there was Adrienne, floating down the aisle in white silk, exactly as beautiful as the first day he'd met her. But now Jordan saw her clearly, saw the calculation behind her smile, the hollow promise in her eyes. He thought about her voice in the darkness of last night, laying out plans to dismantle everything he'd built. The officiant moved through his welcome, speaking of love and commitment, trust and partnership. Jordan stood perfectly still, hands clasped before him, listening to words that should have meant everything but now meant nothing at all. Then came the moment. If anyone can show just cause why these two should not be joined in marriage, speak now or forever. Hold your peace. Jordan let the silence stretch. 1 heartbeat. 2. He felt the collective intake of breath as guests waited for the traditional pause to pass. He stepped forward. "I do," he said clearly. "I have something to say." The garden went absolutely still. Jordan turned to face Adrienne, whose perfect smile had frozen in place. His voice remained steady, warm, the voice of a man simply speaking truth. "I discovered something last night that makes it impossible for me to continue with this ceremony." He turned to address their guests. "I want to apologize to everyone who traveled to be here, who took time from their lives, who believed in this day as much as I did until yesterday. You deserve better than this moment, and I'm sorry." He reached into his pocket, withdrew the velvet ring box, and placed it gently in Adrienne's unresisting hand. Without another word, he slipped off his suit jacket and draped it carefully over the back of the nearest chair. Morning sunlight streamed through Aunt Gloria's kitchen window, warming the worn wooden table where Jordan sat with his 3rd cup of coffee. For 2 days, he'd moved through her house like a ghost, sleeping in his old bedroom, eating the comfort food she silently placed before him, speaking only when necessary. But this morning was different. He opened his laptop with deliberate purpose, his fingers steady on the keys. "You ready to work?" Aunt Gloria asked quietly, setting a fresh mug beside him. Jordan nodded, already logging into his online banking portal. Time to see what 8 months really looks like. He started with the joint checking account he'd opened with Adrienne 6 months ago, a gesture of trust as they planned their future. The transaction history told its own story. Small transfers, gradual increases in access, careful testing of boundaries. He noted each instance in clean, precise handwriting. Next came the shared calendar they'd used to coordinate wedding planning. Jordan scrolled backward methodically, noting patterns he'd missed before. Adrienne's lunch meetings with wedding vendors aligned suspiciously with times Devon had been unavailable for their regular client check-ins. The betrayal had operated on a schedule, hidden in plain sight. The business records were where the real story emerged. Jordan pulled up his firm's documentation, reviewing access logs and permission changes. 6 months ago, Adrienne had offered to help streamline his administrative systems. A generous gesture from a supportive partner, he'd thought at the time. Now he saw the careful positioning for what it was. He found her name added as an emergency contact on the business insurance policy. Her email address appeared on vendor communication chains. She had gradually inserted herself into the infrastructure of everything he'd built, laying groundwork he hadn't recognized until now. Jordan reached for his phone, dialing Thomas's number. His second-in-command picked up on the second ring. "Jordan," Thomas said, his voice careful. "How are you holding up?" "I need to ask you something," Jordan replied, keeping his tone neutral. "About Adrienne's involvement with the business over the last few months." There was a pause on the line. "What do you need to know?" "She asked you questions about the operation. I need to know exactly what information she was seeking." Thomas exhaled slowly. "She asked about everything, now that I think about it. The hotel commission contract details, our revenue projections, client relationship structures." His voice tightened. "I thought she was just being supportive, trying to understand your work better. Jordan, I'm so sorry." "Don't apologize," Jordan cut in firmly. "You had no reason to suspect anything. I didn't either." He made another note in his growing list. Was she particularly interested in anything specific? "The hotel project financials," Tomas said immediately. "She asked a lot about payment schedules, contract terms, and she wanted to understand our banking setup, how we handle client deposits, which accounts we use for different aspects of the business." Jordan wrote it all down, his handwriting remaining steady even as the full picture emerged. The physical affair hadn't been just about betrayal. It was the bond that cemented a financial scheme. Adrian had planned to marry him, gain legal access to marital assets, and then extract maximum value through a carefully timed divorce. 8 months of intimacy with Devon had simply ensured her backup plan was equally invested in the outcome. The hotel commission would have been the perfect timing. Their largest contract to date, with significant upfront payments and ongoing installments. A divorce filed at the right moment would have given her legal claim to portions of those funds as marital assets. He opened another browser tab, pulling up their wedding planning expenses. Large deposits to vendors, all paid from his accounts. Adrian had insisted on handling the arrangements, but had contributed minimally to the costs. Another piece of the pattern. She'd been protecting her own resources while positioning herself to access his. Jordan worked methodically through the morning, documenting everything: bank statements, calendar screenshots, business access logs, email chains. He organized the information with the same precision he brought to his furniture designs, building a foundation of evidence that could support whatever structure needed to be built on top of it. Aunt Gloria moved quietly around the kitchen, refreshing his coffee, occasionally reading over his shoulder as the list grew. She said nothing about the mounting evidence of calculation and betrayal. She simply set her hand on his shoulder when she saw Adrian's name appear yet again in his business insurance document. Jordan opened a fresh notebook, turned to the first clean page, and began creating organized columns. Dates in one, names in another, access points, account numbers, dollar amounts. The architecture of 8 months of careful positioning, laid out in black and white. The next morning dawned clear and crisp. Jordan sat at Aunt Gloria's kitchen table, cell phone in hand, and dialed Priscilla's office number. Her secretary answered, and within moments, Jordan had secured an afternoon appointment. "I need to protect what I've built," he told Priscilla when he walked into her office at 2 o'clock, notebook and folder thick with documentation in hand. Priscilla, a sharp-featured woman in her 50s, gestured to the chair across from her desk. She had handled his business incorporation 3 years ago, impressed by his methodical approach to building his company. Now she watched him carefully as he laid out the evidence he'd gathered. "Show me everything," she said simply. Jordan opened his notebook and began walking her through it all. The gradual insertion of Adrian into his business operations, the emergency contact designations, the access to financial information, the careful positioning that had seemed innocent at the time, but now revealed its true purpose. Priscilla's expression remained neutral as she examined bank statements, calendar records, and business documentation. She made notes of her own, occasionally asking clarifying questions in her precise way. "The pattern is clear," she said finally, setting down the last page. This was a structured attempt to create access points that could be leveraged later. "We need to close every single one." She pulled out a legal pad and began listing actions, removing Adrian from all business insurance policies, revoking any informal access she had to scheduling or vendor communications, documenting every instance where she had sought information about contracts or financials. "I'll draft formal notices regarding her removal from any business-related documentation," Priscilla continued. "We'll need to notify certain vendors and partners that she no longer has any authority to act on behalf of the company. I'll also prepare a statement of facts regarding her attempted positioning within the business structure. This may be relevant if there are any future legal challenges. Jordan nodded, watching as she worked. The afternoon light slanted through her office windows as they methodically dismantled every point of access Adrienne had created. Later that evening, Jordan was helping Aunt Gloria with dinner dishes when headlights swept across the kitchen windows. A car had pulled into the driveway. "It's Camille," Aunt Gloria said, peering through the curtains. "Adrienne's maid of honor." Jordan dried his hands slowly. "I'll talk to her outside." The night air was cooling as Jordan stepped onto the front porch. Camille stood by her car, wringing her hands. Her eyes were red-rimmed, her usual polish cracked. He walked down to the driveway, stopping a few feet from her. "How long did you know?" The direct question broke something in her. Tears spilled down her cheeks. 5 months, she whispered. "I found out by accident. I went to Adrienne's place to drop off wedding samples, and Devon was there. They didn't hear me come in. I saw them together." Jordan stayed perfectly still, his voice level. "And you said nothing." "She made me promise," Camille choked out. "She said it didn't mean anything, that it would end before the wedding. She talked about how much was at stake, how many people were invested in the wedding happening. She knew exactly how to pressure me into keeping quiet." She wiped her eyes, then seemed to make a decision. "But there's something else you need to know. About Devon and Adrienne. They knew each other before. Years ago. Before either of you had any real success. She ended it with him then, because he couldn't give her the life she wanted." Jordan's eyes narrowed slightly. "When did they reconnect?" "When both your careers started taking off. She saw that Devon's real estate business was growing, and your furniture company was getting serious attention. She reached out to him deliberately." Camille's voice shook. "They chose you, Jordan, because you were trusting, because you were generous, with access and information. They thought that made you manageable." The word hung in the cool night air between them. Jordan absorbed it, adding it to his mental architecture of understanding. "Thank you for telling me the truth," he said quietly. "You're not part of what happens next. Go home, Camille." She nodded, relief and shame mingling on her face, and got back in her car. Jordan watched her taillights disappear down the street before walking back inside. In the warm light of Aunt Gloria's kitchen, he opened his notebook to a fresh page. He wrote down everything Camille had revealed: the 5-month timeline, the prior relationship, the deliberate reconnection, the calculated targeting. 2 new pages of context that helped complete the picture of what had been done to him, and why. The next morning, Jordan arrived early at his workshop, finding Tomas already there, reviewing supplier invoices. The familiar smell of sawdust and varnish filled the air as Jordan pulled up a stool beside his second-in-command. "I need you to look into something for me," Jordan said quietly. "Through our industry contacts, what's the current state of Devon Morrow's real estate operations?" Tomas set down his papers, studying Jordan's face. "I can make some calls. The design community talks, especially about developers." "Be discreet," Jordan added. "Just gather what's out there." As Tomas worked his network throughout the morning, Jordan focused on finishing the hotel commission pieces. His hands moved steadily over the wood, each stroke of sandpaper deliberate and precise. By early afternoon, Toma returned with a stack of notes and a concerned expression. "It's not good," Thomas said, closing the workshop door. "Devon's got 3 major development deals in progress, all interconnected. The West Side Commercial Complex, the mixed-use project downtown, and that retail space near the airport. But here's the thing. They're all floating on a bridge loan from Meridian Investment Group." Jordan looked up from his workbench. "How much?" $12 million. Due in 90 days. Tomas shuffled through his notes. "The West Side property is particularly interesting. It's adjacent to that hotel expansion project your clients were considering." Jordan's hands stilled on the wood. "The same hotel group I introduced him to 8 months ago." "Exactly. He used your connection to get meetings with their development team." pitched himself as your trusted associate. Tomas shook his head. From what I hear, he's betting everything on these deals closing before the bridge loan comes due. If any one of them falls through, they all fall, Jordan finished. He wiped his hands slowly on his work cloth, thinking, who's the project manager at the hotel group now? Still Aubrey Mitchell. He thinks highly of you after that custom furniture commission. Jordan nodded, reaching for his phone. He had Aubrey's direct number from their previous work together. The call connected after 2 rings. Aubrey. Jordan Price. Do you have a few minutes to discuss something sensitive? He stepped outside the workshop, looking out at the morning traffic as he chose his next words carefully. I need to make you aware of a situation. There's a development professional who accessed relationships with your group through my personal connection. I've since discovered serious concerns about their professional ethics and integrity. A pause on the line. I appreciate you bringing this to my attention, Jordan. Your reputation with us carries weight. Are we talking about anyone specific? I'd rather not name names right now, Jordan replied. But I felt obligated to alert you, given that I facilitated the introduction. I trust your team will do their own due diligence. We certainly will, Aubrey said. We take our partner relationships very seriously. I'll look into this personally. After ending the call, Jordan returned to the workshop. Thomas was waiting with one more piece of information. The bridge loan, Thomas said. 2 of Meridian's principal investors sit on your hotel client's advisory board. Jordan absorbed this, seeing the connections align. He worked silently through the afternoon, letting the steady rhythm of his hands on wood calm his mind. When evening came, he packed up his tools and drove back to Aunt Gloria's house. She was at the kitchen table when he arrived, a cup of tea cooling beside her crossword. Jordan sat down heavily in the chair across from her. Found out some interesting things about Devon today, he said quietly. Aunt Gloria set down her pen, giving him her full attention as he laid out what Thomas had discovered. The over-leveraged deals, the bridge loan deadline, the hotel connection, the seeds of doubt he'd planted with Aubrey. When he finished, she studied him in that way she had, seeing past the surface to what lay beneath. Sounds like the stage is nearly set. Almost, Jordan agreed. Just need 2 more things to happen. What do you need? She asked simply. Jordan ran his finger along a groove in the wooden table, one he'd made himself as a gift for her years ago, before any of this began. 2 meetings, he said, and 1 table. The next morning, Jordan was back at his workbench when his phone buzzed. Priscilla's name lit up the screen. I found something you need to see, she said without preamble. 11 days before the wedding, Adrian had a consultation with Marcus Thorne at Thorne & Associates. They specialize in family law, particularly cases involving business owners and asset division. Jordan set down his sandpaper, listening. The consultation was specifically about asset classification in marriages where one spouse owns an established business, Priscilla continued. She was gathering information about how your company could be categorized as a marital asset after the wedding. She was building the legal framework, Jordan said quietly, before she even walked down the aisle. Exactly. This wasn't impulsive, Jordan. She was constructing the exit before the entrance. Jordan ran his hand along the grain of the wood in front of him, feeling its texture beneath his fingers. Can you document all of this? Already done. The question is, do you want to pursue the affair itself as grounds for a breach of promise claim? We have Camille's testimony. We could make a case that the engagement was entered under fraudulent pretenses while she was carrying on a physical relationship with another man. No, Jordan said after a moment. The financial documentation is cleaner, more precise. I don't want a messy court battle where she can paint herself as a confused woman who made a mistake. I want consequences that can't be rewritten. I understand. Priscilla paused. I'm preparing a sealed, notarized envelope with full documentation of both the affair and the financial scheme. It won't be filed unless needed. but it will exist as a permanent record if she ever tries to revise the narrative of why the wedding didn't happen. Good, Jordan said. Thank you. After ending the call, Jordan picked up his own phone. 3 calls to make, each one precise, measured, necessary. First, Adrienne. Her phone rang 4 times before she answered, her voice carefully neutral. We need to handle some logistics, he said calmly. The lease, personal items. Can you come to Aunt Gloria's tomorrow afternoon? A pause. Yes, Adrienne said finally. What time? 3 o'clock. He kept his voice even, practical. Let her think this was about closing chapters. Next, Devon. This call went to voicemail, exactly as Jordan expected. Devon had been avoiding direct contact since the wedding. We need to talk, Jordan said simply. Workshop tomorrow morning at 10. Just you and me. He ended the call, knowing Devon would come, if only to attempt damage control. Finally, Aubrey. The hotel project manager answered on the first ring. I'm ready to complete our discussion from yesterday, Jordan said. I can share the specific information about the developer we discussed. Would 9 a.m. work? I'll clear my calendar, Aubrey replied. In the kitchen, Aunt Gloria was just hanging up her own phone. She looked at Jordan with quiet satisfaction. Miss Eloise will be here tomorrow, she said, and Philip's driving up from Macon in the morning. Jordan nodded slowly. He hadn't asked her to make those calls. He hadn't needed to. Aunt Gloria understood that some reckonings required witnesses from within the family, not as weapons, but as people who needed to see the truth themselves. Miss Eloise already knew. Aunt Gloria added softly, Camille called her 3 days ago. Couldn't carry it alone anymore. She's been sitting with it, waiting. Jordan absorbed this. The truth had been traveling on its own, finding the people who needed to receive it. He wasn't orchestrating everything. He was simply creating the space for consequences to arrive naturally. The rest of the day passed in steady, focused work. Jordan's hands moved over wood and tools with practiced precision, each motion exact and purposeful. As evening settled over the workshop, he sat alone at his bench, working a chair leg with fine grit sandpaper, back and forth, until the wood was exactly right under his fingers. Everything was in position now. The pieces were aligned. Tomorrow would bring its own gravity. The next morning, sunlight streamed through the workshop's high windows as Devon pushed open the heavy door. The familiar smell of wood and varnish filled the air. He hesitated in the doorway, scanning the space for Jordan. Jordan stood at his workbench, methodically applying finish to a cabinet panel with smooth, even strokes. He didn't look up. Close the door behind you. Devon stepped inside, letting the door swing shut. His polished appearance, crisp button-down, expensive watch, seemed out of place among the sawdust and tools. He cleared his throat. Jordan, I know we need to talk about— There's a chair by the bench if you want to sit. Jordan interrupted quietly, still focused on his work. The brush moved in perfect rhythm across the wood grain. Devon remained standing, shifting his weight. Look, I understand you're angry. You have every right to be. But I hope we can— 8 months, Jordan said, finally setting down his brush. He turned to face Devon, his expression calm. That's how long you and Adrienne were together in my house. Sometimes when I was working late here. Sometimes when I was meeting clients. He picked up a manila folder from the bench. I have the security camera timestamps, if you'd like to see them. Jordan, it wasn't— Devon started, but Jordan continued as if he hadn't spoken. While that was happening, Adrienne was positioning herself inside my business administration, getting added to accounts, asking questions about contracts, and you were using our friendship to get close to my hotel client group. Jordan's voice remained steady. 8 months of calculating how to extract value from my trust. That's not fair, Devon protested. The hotel connection was just business networking. You offered to make that introduction yourself. I did, Jordan agreed, because that's what friends do. But here's what you don't know. I spoke with Aubrey this morning, told him everything about how you accessed his group through a personal connection you were actively betraying, about your real estate operations' ethical compromises. The color drained from Devon's face. You had no right. I had every right, Jordan said quietly. And Aubrey's team is already withdrawing from any potential involvement with your projects, which is unfortunate timing, given your bridge loan situation. Devon sank into the chair, his composure cracking. How did you— The same way I know Adrian consulted a divorce attorney 11 days before the wedding. I pay attention. Jordan opened the folder. This contains documentation for a civil suit. Intentional interference with business relationship. Breach of our informal referral partnership. Evidence of how you leveraged our connection to access my client network while engaging in personal conduct that compromised my business interests. Jordan, please. Devon's voice shook slightly. We can work this out. I know I betrayed your trust, but you can sign this statement that Priscilla prepared. Jordan continued calmly, placing a document on the bench. It acknowledges what you did and commits you to permanently ending all contact with me, my clients, and my professional network. Sign it, and the civil suit stays in this folder. Devon stared at the paper, then at Jordan. The workshop's silence felt heavy. You really had all of this ready? I build things carefully, Jordan said. Always have. You just never paid attention to how I do it. With trembling fingers, Devon picked up the pen Jordan offered. His signature was shaky, but legible. Jordan collected the signed document and walked to the door. He pulled it open, morning light spilling across the threshold. We're done. Devon stood slowly, straightening his expensive shirt. He opened his mouth as if to speak, then closed it. The man who had always had smooth words for every situation finally had none left. He walked out without looking back. Jordan closed the door with a solid click. He returned to his workbench, picked up his brush, and resumed applying finish to the cabinet panel. His strokes were as steady as they had been before, precise, measured, exact. The morning light continued to pour through the high windows, catching the fresh varnish as it dried to a perfect shine. The workshop was quiet except for the soft sound of the brush moving across wood, back and forth, in the practiced rhythm of a man who knew exactly what he was building. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across Aunt Gloria's front porch as Adrian climbed the familiar steps. Her heels clicked against the wooden boards, the same sound they'd made countless times before when she'd visited as Jordan's fiancée. She adjusted her designer blazer, mentally rehearsing the reasonable, measured approach she'd planned for discussing the lease and dividing their shared belongings. The door opened before she could knock. Jordan stood in the entryway, his expression unreadable. Beyond him, Adrienne could see Aunt Gloria seated in her usual chair. But as she stepped inside, her carefully prepared composure cracked. At Gloria's kitchen table sat Miss Eloise, her own grandmother, and Uncle Philip, both looking at her with the steady, disappointed gazes of elders who had driven from Macon to witness accountability. "What is this?" Adrienne's voice wavered slightly. She remained frozen just inside the doorway, her designer purse clutched tight against her side. "Please, sit down," Jordan said quietly, gesturing to the empty chair across from Miss Eloise. The afternoon light through the kitchen windows caught the silver threads in her grandmother's hair, making them shine like steel. Adrienne lowered herself into the chair, her movements stiff. The familiar scent of Aunt Gloria's lemon furniture polish filled the air, the same scent that had meant comfort and acceptance when she'd first started dating Jordan. Now it felt suffocating. Jordan remained standing, removing a folder from the counter. His voice was calm, measured, the same tone he used when walking clients through furniture specifications. "I want to be very clear about what happened here. Not just for me, but for your family who deserves to know who you've chosen to become." He began laying out documents on the table: bank records, calendar screenshots, Business account logs. 8 months of bringing Devon into our home while I worked late. 8 months of positioning yourself inside my business administration. 11 days before the wedding, you consulted a divorce attorney about marital asset classification. Aunt Gloria sat silently in her chair, hands folded in her lap, watching. Uncle Philip's jaw tightened with each new piece of evidence. "Jordan," Adrian started, attempting to regain control of the narrative. "Whatever you think happened with Devon, it was a mistake. A moment of weakness that didn't mean anything. We can work through this if you'll just—" "Don't!" Miss Eloise's voice cut through the air like a blade. "Don't you dare sit at this table and try to make small what you did." Her eyes, the same deep brown as Adrian's, held none of their usual warmth. "You brought a man into that child's house. The night before, you were going to stand in front of God and His people and make promises you'd been breaking for 8 months. That's not weakness. That's a decision." Adrian's face paled. "Grandma, please. You don't understand." "I understand everything," Miss Eloise said. "Camille called me 3 days ago, told me every detail about you and Devon's history, about targeting Jordan when his business started growing, about planning to marry him just to take what he built." Uncle Philip leaned forward, his voice low and final. "The Holloway name is not available as cover for this conduct. You will sign the mutual release Jordan has prepared. You will vacate the property immediately. You will stay permanently clear of his professional life and connection." His eyes narrowed. "This is not a negotiation. This is your family telling you what comes next." Jordan placed the release document on the table. Adrian stared at it, her carefully constructed reality crumbling. With trembling fingers, she picked up the pen Aunt Gloria silently offered. Her signature was barely legible. She stood quickly, gathering her purse, unable to meet anyone's eyes. As she reached the door, Jordan's voice stopped her. "Adrian." His tone held no anger, no pain, just quiet certainty. "You picked the wrong man to build against. I know how to build things that last." The door closed behind her with a soft click. In the kitchen's heavy silence, Jordan released a slow breath. He reached for Aunt Gloria's hand, squeezed it once, and gave a single nod. Through the window, the afternoon sun continued to pour across the kitchen table, illuminating the signed release that marked the end of what Adrian had tried to destroy, and the beginning of what Jordan had carefully, methodically built in its place. The early morning sun streamed through the high windows of Jordan's new workshop, casting long golden rectangles across the freshly sealed concrete floor. He unlocked the front door, breathing in the mingled scents of raw wood, varnish, and possibility. His coffee steamed in the morning air as he walked through the expanded space, nearly triple the size of his original workshop. Stacks of carefully selected lumber lined one wall, each piece hand-picked for specific commissions. 3 new workbenches stood ready, tools arranged with precise care. The completed pieces from the hotel commission had been photographed last week for a prominent design magazine, the second publication to feature his work in recent months. Jordan set his coffee down and ran his hand along the smooth surface of a nearly finished walnut credenza. The hotel installation had exceeded expectations, leading to a flood of commission requests from clients who appreciated both the craftsmanship and the story behind each piece. He'd had to start a waiting list. The sound of keys in the door made him smile. Tomas arrived early as usual, carrying 2 paper bags from the local bakery. "Thought we could use breakfast before the new guys show up," he said, setting the bags down. "Still can't believe how different this place looks from when we first viewed it." "Good different?" Jordan asked, though he already knew the answer. "The best kind," Thomas replied, pulling out still warm pastries. "Marcus called yesterday about that conference table commission, said his board was impressed with the design presentation." Jordan nodded, thinking of the detailed sketches he'd prepared. The corporate commissions had started rolling in after the hotel feature, But he'd been selective, choosing projects that allowed for true craftsmanship rather than just quick production. The day passed in a productive blur of training his two new craftspeople, reviewing designs, and finalizing details for the evening's small celebration. As the sun began to set, the workshop transformed. Simple tables were arranged in an L shape, covered with white cloths. Aunt Gloria arrived early to supervise the catering setup, arranging everything with her usual quiet efficiency. The dinner guests began arriving at 7. Tomas and his wife, the new craftspeople and their families, a few key clients who'd become friends. Aunt Gloria sat at the head of the table, elegant in deep purple, presiding over the gathering like the queen she was. Midway through the meal, Tomas stood and cleared his throat. "I'd like to propose a toast," he said, raising his glass, "to Jordan, who taught me that the strongest things are built slowly, with patience and precision, who showed us all that integrity isn't just a word, it's a practice. To the new workshop, and to many more years of building beautiful things that last." Jordan laughed genuinely, for the first time in months, the sound carrying through the workshop. The space felt alive with possibility and honest work. While the celebration continued, Jordan's mind briefly turned to those who weren't there. Through his professional network, he'd heard that Devon's bridge loan had collapsed after Aubrey's quiet words reached the right ears. The investor group had withdrawn support, triggering a cascade of problems. Last he'd heard, Devon was trying to rebuild in a smaller market several states away, his reputation and network in tatters. Adrian's story had unfolded differently, not through dramatic collapse, but through quiet closing doors. Her professional world had proved smaller than she'd calculated, more connected to Jordan's client circles than she'd considered. Opportunities simply stopped appearing. Introductions weren't made. Camille, sharing many of the same social and professional spaces, couldn't maintain their friendship under the weight of what she knew. Miss Eloise still called Adrienne on her birthday and holidays. She wasn't the type to abandon family entirely. But the warmth carried new conditions, evident in every careful pause. Jordan had heard through Aunt Gloria that Adrienne thought of him sometimes, not with longing or desire, but with the specific regret of someone who had held something valuable with careless hands and watched it walk away whole. After the last guests left, Jordan stood alone in the workshop's quiet. He moved to a massive dining table near completion, commissioned by a young family who wanted an heirloom piece their children's children would gather around. His fingers traced the grain of the wood, feeling the subtle variations that made each piece unique. A small smile crossed his face as he picked up his favorite smoothing plane. The weight felt right in his hands, natural, true. Some men built beautiful things, he thought. But the best ones knew when to stop building for the wrong people and start building for themselves. I hope you enjoyed that one. Be sure to like the video and subscribe so you don't miss the next story. I've picked out 2 more for you that I think you'll really like.